So, welcome to the channel where we discuss fantasy, fandoms, cults, and other issues. So, it was good. It was pretty good, but I will probably be on the more critical end with Dunk and Egg. So, what was the problem? Well, the acting was sometimes a little weak, and Dunk did a few ticks, which I found fine a little bit, but then it got more and more annoying. And the lead actor is very, very good. He is very good. But Peter did a very good job. However, I cannot lie and say, could they have found someone else? Yes. Would it be a huge improvement? I don't think so. I was actually shocked by the kid because I have not enjoyed the Hunger Games prequels. I mean, I'd have to be fair, the Hunger Game movies are not great, but they were fine. But the prequels just feel like, wow, these are dizzyingly stupid, bland, boring. They don't really add very much. I mean, the world building in Hunger Games is not that good to begin with, so this is not like the Star Wars prequels where we can debate that forever, but at least George tried to do something interesting and subversive and risky with the mythology. But those things were just like, this is just a waste of time. They're only there, they honestly seem to just to be made fun of and mocked. And I really didn't remember that child actor from that, but he stuck out here and he's very, very good. Now, we don't see a lot of Egg. Egg is more of a minor character here, but what we see of him in the first episode, I'd have to give his acting like a 10 out of 10. Now, he does do a similar tick, the way he moves his head. He does a very, very, there'll probably be a lot of memes, the way he swings his head when he senses Dunk is lying or, oh, you're in trouble, you need help. And then he, gently gives him, say this, do this. And Dunk is like, oh, okay, I got to do that. So, yeah, that, however, is well done. It's not like Anakin in the prequels. I'm not going to do a tirade, but although I do defend the prequels and Phantom Menace especially, I would have to concede. I think I was a little too nice to Jake Lloyd and his acting. It is not that good. I feel sorry for what happened to the actor. Jake Lloyd is a very tragic figure, but the acting is sometimes really brutal with Anakin, and it's not here. It's very nice. It flows very naturalistically. And unfortunately, being brutal, probably Peter is the lesser actor of this entire group because everyone else is like 10 out of 10. Still great. I'd give him like 8.5, but yeah, the acting was uniformly good. I no bad acting at all. The performances were all committed. It's convincing. Nothing to complain about there. The costumes also were really well done, especially the armor. Like the armor and the way they're making slight changes, but nothing too radical, and it felt very well done there too. However, I will note that a hardcore fan noticed some errors with the costumes and the sigils, and certain aspects were inconsistent with Game of Thrones. It is what it is. It is a contradiction with the rest of the lore and mythology, but it's not jarring. It's not jarring. But let's get this out of the way. Do you have to read the books? No. In fact, I'd have to say you're better off not reading the books because, again, they didn't ruin it for me, but I would not have done this. The problem is for me, in terms of the Game of Thrones books, and I've always said this, that I think George's 1980s work is a lot better than Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is fine, but I always considered like him kind of average George. If you want great George, go to the 1980s. But anyway, but I have to say, in terms of the entire mythology, this is one of my top 10 favorite moments, and they didn't ruin it. It's like basically faithful, but I don't know. It's just me. I really loved the way that Dunk talks to the Dead Knight at the very beginning, and it didn't quite capture the magic of the books. So that's just my perspective. I'm not taking a point off, but they're definitely going in a different direction. And again, I didn't mind the extreme humor that happens later after that tragic scene, but it is a bit of a pattern that they mix the tragedy and comedy, and for the most part, it is handled very gently and very carefully. But sometimes it's very sloppy, and so to me, the books are much superior. However, if you don't want to read the books, this is an adequate adaptation, but it's not one to one. They are making a lot of changes, big changes, small changes. Again, it's not terrible adaptation, but if you wanted certain things from the books, they don't carry it over. So if you want that genuine dunk and egg, you got to go to the books or the comic book, frankly. But in terms of the Game of Thrones universe on television, I would have to rank this very high. I have to say this is much better than the later seasons of Game of Thrones, where it started to really decline. It is much better than the very bad episodes of House of the Dragon, but it doesn't match the really good episodes of Game of Thrones or the really good House of the Dragon doesn't have that many good episodes, but they're very rare hot D episode. This is below that because it does look very cheap in places. I'll give several examples. Like they have this party scene, which is very well done. It's very fun and enjoyable, but you can definitely tell, oh, they had a limit. They could only have so many extras. And they're like, okay, we can give you this much for the budget, but we got to stop. Now, it never feels like they're being cheap, but if you know more and more about television production and Game of Thrones especially, yeah, they're really being mindful of the budget. Again, I'm not going to go into the tirade about House of the Dragon and they cut 2 episodes, but they cut 2 episodes. So it's ironic that this is going to be 6 episodes, but they're so the irony is I'd much rather see more of this, although this is not my thing. This is not definitely going to not be my favorite show. I don't really like where they're going with the story, but it's fine. It's very fine. However, there's not a lot to analyze or examine or get angry about or care about too much either because it's a very simple plot, at least for this episode. Dunk finds Egg. They have some backs and forths, and Dunk is taking a lot of risks even being here and trying to joust, and he's not respected. So he has to grow and learn, and he's being mocked and teased by some girls, and so on and so forth. And then at the end, he and Egg obviously reunite and be like, all right, fine, you're going to be my mentor. You'll be my apprentice. And obviously they go back and forth. Well, you got to learn from me. And, well, I got to learn from you and yada, yada. And the dynamic is fine. They're both very charismatic. So I had no major issues. But not a lot happens. And this is the biggest episode. So he loses an old friend, gains the armor and sword. He goes to the tournament and is a little bit overwhelmed by the politics and the lords and all that stuff. But he's a nice young noble knight. He really believes in the dream of being a knight in Westeros. It's all very touching and sentimental, but again, it doesn't have that epic feel or the kind of very good tension. When Game of Thrones is very good, both in the books and the TV show, you need a lot of tension between different characters, right? Tywin, right? And the Lannisters versus the Starks, Jon versus Daenerys versus Tyrion. You need some of that back and forth energy. It doesn't really have that. We don't really have an antagonist yet. I don't think we know who the antagonist is. So Dunk doesn't really have someone who he's fighting. He's more fighting his own self doubt. And the standout scene was Daniel. He really stole the show. He was very charismatic and very funny. So it's a good show. It's enjoyable, and certain sections are very excellent. However, it doesn't feel like classic Game of Thrones, the books or TV show. It is very much like a big side adventure that's just been inflated and inflated. And that's fine. I don't mind looking at minor characters. I mean, I take the not consensus position that the minor characters in Star Wars are way more interesting. I'd much rather spend more time with Han Solo, more time with Django, more time, frankly, with Boss than with Anakin. I just don't find Anakin very interesting. I don't find Padme after the first film really interesting. Again, the main characters to me, except for Obi, but then they kind of butchered his character after the first film, but that's another story. But for the most part, the main characters in Star Wars do not really interest me. They just seem to be deadly dull. Whether it's Rey, Anakin, or Luke, they're just super dull. Nothing really ever happens with them. They're bland. It's just paint. It's just paint drying. But Game of Thrones is very different where the side characters are juicy. It's beefy. There's a lot. So there's a lot here. But I found it really weird that they are going away from the text. So they could have done even more crazy, adventuresome things. So I don't know if George got nervous or they got nervous. Now that you're not really obeying the text, they could have done some really zany stuff. So it just feels like market tested and a little safe. But that said, they made their choices. It's a very weird, extreme show. So if you're into the Deadpool R-rated humor, you'll like this. I like that stuff, but I don't love it. So it's a mixed bag for me. It is what it is. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I do recommend it, but I will kind of be coming in something I need to watch and I like it, but I don't love it. This is not the Django or Andor series I wanted, which I really did because they did a brilliant job with Andor, looking at these quote minor characters and did something incredible with them. Again, you don't have to love all of Andor. I did not love all Andor, but introduced an entirely interesting universe just with these minor characters. And here, it's a good universe. It's an interesting universe, but it's not Andor. And I was hoping for Andor, but it is what it is. It is what it is.